Here's a question from Mary. She has a problem that when editing, her video seems to be moving slowly while the audio is moving fine. So let's talk about the 3 things that we can do to fix this problem. Here are the 3 immediate steps that Mary can take to improve her situation. First, use proxy files. Secondly, render the videos on the timeline. And the third is use the Instant Cutter tool. Let's discuss these options in more detail. Before we discuss each of these 3 solutions, let's talk a little bit about why it's happening in the first place. Mary is saying that as she's playing back the video, the sound sounds okay, but the video is playing in slow motion. Presumably, I would say it's probably being jumpy or lagging, as people like to say, and so it's trying to catch up. This happens because the computer cannot keep up with the execution of the program code in Filmora. Filmora is working perfectly fine, but the computer can't keep up. When the computer can't use any more memory, then it starts writing instructions to the hard drive. And the hard drive is always slower, no matter what kind of hard drive you have. And when it does that, then the read-write instructions slows down, and this is what causes lagging. Now, audio is easier to render than video, so it's not uncommon to see audio to seem to appear normal while you have lagging in the video portion. The video portion just simply can't keep up. Okay, so that's the nature of the problem. Now let's go to step number 1. Proxy files is our first option for trying to alleviate this problem. And we go to proxy files over here in File, Preferences, Performance, and we scroll down here to the bottom. If you don't have it activated and you have a piece of media being imported, a video clip that's greater than this 1920 by 1080, which is HD or 2K, then it's going to ask you if you want to create a proxy file. If you activate this and you import media that's greater than this, it's automatically going to go ahead and create the proxy file for you. Now you can import it at an even lower resolution, as low as 1280 by 720. And that even at this lower resolution, it's probably okay. A proxy file, again, is a copy of your original file. It is not what's going to get exported. It's simply what you're going to edit. And any edits you make to the proxy file will be applied to the export or the original when you do the export. So proxy files is a good way to improve the smoothness of your editing experience. So let's see what happens when I activate this and I apply this feature. I will now go ahead and import a file that is greater than the setting. And we can see that right here there is a dark ring around this. And as this is being imported, a little blue line will form around this. And when that circle is done, then the proxy file or the copy of the file has been created. We can now see that the program, any files that I have previously imported that don't have a proxy file, are getting their proxy files created. Option 2 is to render your media on the timeline. Initially, when you drag something down to the timeline, you will see this red line here at the top. That means that it's only done what we call a lazy load. You can go ahead and edit that, and if you have a powerful computer, there's no problem at all. If you have a computer that's going to get impacted by a high density media or something like that, it is better to let this render, let the computer process it, because then the playback will be smoother. Now we can set that up in preferences, and we will do that in a second. But if we don't do it that way, there's also a button that they added here on the screen to render it in the preview. And so you really have two ways of doing it, but let's automate the process. And in doing that, we would go up here to File and Preferences again, and Performance again, and we'll see this preview render. If it annoys you to have to sit and wait every time that you drag something down to the timeline and have it just stall out and render, then you can turn it off altogether. It's not the best way to go about it, but it's one way you can do it. But what Wondershare has done with it is they have now set where you can set a time in which the computer is just sitting idle. In other words, you're not moving the mouse around, you're not doing anything else within the program. And if it sees that the computer is just sitting here, it will start rendering in the background. We will go ahead and apply this, and it says after 5 seconds, go ahead and start rendering. So we'll do this, and when we do, and I leave the mouse steady for 5 seconds, we will see the green line then all of a sudden appear across here. So let's observe that. And there is the green line, and it's now rendering. Once a file has been rendered, then it will play back more smoothly. So this is Mary's second option for improving her playback. Now the third, and probably the most important of the three, is to use the Instant Cutter tool. I'm not going to get into a full demonstration of the Instant Cutter tool, but I will leave a link in the description to this video where you can see how to use it. The point of the Instant Cutter tool is to trim out anything that you're not going to use in the video anyway. For example, if you put something down on the timeline right here and you say, well, I'm not going to use this portion of it right here, you think that you have shrunk what you have in memory, but in reality you haven't, because you can save this project, you can open it the next day, and you can still click on this and you can still stretch it out to its full length. And the only reason you can do this stretching is because the whole thing is sitting in memory. The point of the Instant Cutter tool is to make your cuts before you actually import it into your project. And again, I'm not going to get into the full description of how to use it. I am simply going to show you where it is and how to get to it. Okay, so if you're going to import a file, import, and then you'll notice here, import with Instant Cutter tool. This starts another program that is built into Filmora, and we go to Open File, and I'm going to go over here where I have some very big files, and we're going to look here. Here is a 12 gigabyte file. So if I was to load this in and not use all of it, I would be really taxing the memory of the machine. So I could say open, and now I have this 12 gigabyte file here, and I can choose to say, okay, I only want to use this little bit out of it, and I can export it and drop it right into my project. As I said, I'm not going to go through the full explanation how to use this because I've already made this video. I'm simply going to be using a link in there. But this can significantly cut down the amount of memory that you're using in your computer. And by doing so, you would improve the playback because you're not using as much memory. Those are the 3 basic steps you could take. Use proxy files, use rendering on the timeline, and most importantly, use the Instant Cutter tool when you're up against hardware limitations. I'm going to give you a 4th tip in case you get into a project and you really got into the weeds and made a large project, and now you can't export it because it's exceeding the capacity of your machine. Or let's just say that you know you're going to have a big project and you're going to have problems. How can you still make your video? And that is to export segments. You could, for example, delete half of this, export it, and then come back and using the keystrokes Control Z, restore that, delete the front half, and then export the second half. Now, what's the point of doing these segments? The point of it is that if you're using a lot of tracks, you got titles, you got a bunch of other stuff, you got multiple clips and things stacked on top of each other, that requires a lot more memory. That will also slow down your editing process. If you develop the stuff in segments, when you export something, everything, and it includes both video as well as audio tracks, all gets condensed to one single track. It requires less processing power to process one single track than it does to process 10 or 15. In Filmora, you can actually make up to 100 tracks, and that will tax the most robust computer of any kind. And so it's a very powerful program and can easily be abused in that respect. But once you reduce it all to one track, it is much simpler to export. So if you had created a project in segments, let's say you were on a family trip or vacation, you could break it into day by day by day. Or if you were at a resort and you want to do a review on the resort, you could do a segment on the pools, a segment on the restaurants, a segment on the beach, or segment or whatever, and then export each one of those segments, start a new project, import all of your segments, which are now a single line, and you, with a smaller computer, smaller in the sense it has less memory, could easily process a much larger 1 hour, 2 hour video and still get it out smoothly, both editing it as well as exporting it. So that's just the bonus tip number 4. I hope this helps Mary. I hope this helps somebody else who will encounter a similar problem. I am going to put several links to videos down below that will give you a deeper explanation. What is the difference between a proxy file and rendering? What are the things, or how can you observe when your computer is lagging or whatever? How can you actually take a look and see what's happening? So there will be 2 more links. In all, there will be 3 links in the description. How to use the Instant Cutter tool, demystifying lagging and other weird effects in Filmora, and the difference between render, preview render, and proxy files. Those links will be found in the description.